Check one, two, three. Hey everybody, it's Michael Helms, also known as Michael the Sound Guy, and this is the Location Sound Podcast. You know, each episode we talk with location sound mixers, boom ops, and other industry pros about the various aspects of recording sound on location, whether it's for feature and independent films, TV commercials, interviews, any time where dialogue from actors is recorded. I started my career in the recording studios in New York City with some of the big artists back in the day, and later on projects for networks like HBO, Sci-Fi Channel, and the Cartoon Network. As time went by, I got out of the studio and began working in production sound. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting out, thanks for joining us. All right, my guest today is a production sound mixer, boom op, editor, and videographer based in St. George, Utah. Please welcome Kreigh Carter.
How's it going, man? How are you?
Hey, Kreigh, pleasure. Glad you could be here today. We finally worked out our schedules.
Yeah, geez, just two busy schedules trying to collide, right?
Exactly. All right, Kreigh, when you're mixing on set, what's in your audio kit? So tell us about your mics, your mixer, power distro, and everything in between.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I'm generally a boom op most of the time, so I just have a really basic kind of kit that I can just do small stuff, ENG stuff, local stuff. So I got a Zoom F8, and I've got a few different Sennheisers for wireless. I've got a couple Sennheiser AVXs and G4s, and then for timecode, I've got the Tentacle Syncs. I got a couple of the new ones. As for mics, I've got just a 416 that I generally use for kind of outdoor stuff, and then I've got just kind of an Audix mic for my indoor dialogue sort of stuff. So it's pretty basic, but like I said, most of the work I do is kind of boom opping, so I don't generally bring, a lot of my own equipment. It's kind of the mixer's already got all the good stuff, so I just got enough to get by with, some local things like that.
We mentioned that you have a full-service video production company called Kreigh Carter Productions. So which came first for you? Was it sound or video?
Oh, man, that is a good question. When I got out of school, I was kind of the only one that was sort of into sound at all. There's just not a lot of people that go into the film stuff and they want to do sound. So I kind of got into sound first probably. But I figured out pretty quickly, Southern Utah doesn't have a whole lot big productions come through. Salt Lake a little bit, but not so much in Southern Utah. So I found out, kind of you'd get a couple movies or something, and then you'd have to fill in the gaps, kind of around town. And me being a family guy and stuff like that too, trying to balance that whole act, as I'm sure you and a lot of listeners kind of have to figure that out too. Just being home once in a while, and doing my own production stuff to fill in the gaps was very helpful too. I just, can't do feature after feature after feature away, So I think it was sound first, but they kind of both came once I got out of college.
Now, with your audio background, how does that influence kind of how you approach a project?
Well, a general project that I do, most of them are small commercials around town and stuff like that. And, you're kind of doing a little bit of everything. So you got to do some lighting, you got to do some camera, you got to do everything. But the good thing about being an audio background is kind of, I feel comfortable, I've got all the miking accessories. I got all, I feel real comfortable miking someone up and just knowing that it's going to sound good. Whereas I've seen others kind of in this space, they kind of, they have to put a boom mic up and wire them and listen and figure it out. And it's kind of, just the comfort of kind of having a background in sound and knowing that you kind of know how to get the best sound already. I know that's helped out a lot. And it's like they say, man, it's like a lot of people talk about, sound's so important for all your productions, but not a lot of them know how to get the best sound. So when you just have clean audio all the time, I'm more worried about what the camera's doing, and I can, because that's kind of secondary to me. So I can kind of focus on that or the lighting or something, and the sound, I know it's going to sound great because I've wired up so many people,
Now, as a boom op, what's your approach or philosophy when you're booming?
If the production's big enough that, I've got someone kind of helping me with wiring stuff, a utility or something like that, first thing I go to the beginning of the day is I just try to find a PA, try to get some sides, and so I can figure out what my dialogue's going to be for the day. I hate being really unprepared. It makes me super anxiety-ridden, just antsy if I feel like oh shoot, we're about to shoot and I don't know the dialogue. I don't know who's going to be wearing what mics. I don't know what they're wearing. Like that stuff, that freaks me out. That gets me a little bit. So I'll even show up early. If I can get there early and go through the sides and like make a plan for the day, I just am way more calm. And so that's what I try to figure out, because then you can kind of go into the other stuff, like what's the lighting look like? What's the frame look like? Things like that. And then, just one, as just tackling one thing at a time, the biggest problem to the smallest problem. Once you've got them all out of the way, it's kind of like you can take a little breath for a minute as they're setting up camera, as they're setting up lights, and you kind of know your plan. So beginning of the day, I try to get the size, try to kind of figure out a plan with my mixer. If we've got a utility or something, talk with them, figure it out. But just the more I can get done before things get hectic, by far the best,
What's the technical setup usually when you're monitoring your boom? How do you like to receive that audio back from the mixer if you're just booming?
Generally, I just would like to listen to the boom just so I can tell if it sounds thin, if I'm off axis a little bit. I can tell that a little bit better if it's in both ears. I don't like to wear the big headphones when I'm just boom mopping, just because I like to keep an open ear to camera. I like to keep an open ear on set just so I'm, in my space and still not getting in people's way. So I prefer to just wear buds, and I'd like to listen to the boom just so I can kind of know what I'm doing. But before, if he can send me a mix or something, kind of while we're setting up, just so I can hear how everyone's mics are sounding, or he'll just come through the mixer or whatever and just tell me if they're sounding a little scratchy or something. We can fix that ahead of time. But generally, I just like to listen to the boom.
What kind of IFB setup do you like to wear?
I really don't have a preference on that necessarily. I have a couple headphones just Sony headphones, buds that I like, and they're probably not even the best. It's more like it might be like a luck thing. I don't know. I still get freaked out on sets. I've been on so many by this time, but I still get that anxiety before sets. So I have rituals that I go through. I like to eat the same stuff in the morning before we go. I just don't like to shake things up. So I have headphones that I've wore forever. In fact, I just had to put a couple of mine to rest because they had finally they're done. But I saved them because they had been on how many movies with me. So they're kind of just in my trophy shrine now. But so I just have some pretty basic Sony buds that I usually use, but it doesn't matter too much to me. Just as long as I can kind of hear generally what's going on, I'm okay with it. I'm more a man of ritual than of actual technical, like getting everything exactly technically right.
Yeah, you're talking about eating the right things and eating the same thing. And I was doing something the other day, and I forget, we were on set, and all of a sudden my stomach just like did this churn. I was like, oh no, we do not have time for this. And luckily, everything went away, but I was just like, you never know, because you're in places, sometimes you have access to quality facilities and other times you don't.
Yeah, man, there is nothing worse than being on a 12, 14-hour day on set and you're just sick. I'm sure we've all been through it, but those days, man, they're not like other jobs sometimes where you can just call out or get, you can kind of take it easy. Like you're still there. You have to do the job. And you usually don't know till, that morning or something. So, there's nothing worse than that. I've had some sets where there have been, not the best crafty, not the best catering, and it's taken its toll on people. That's for sure.
Well, I was looking over your IMDb, and you've worked on a number of feature film projects. So what's one that stands out for you so far?
We did one, probably one of my favorites. We did one a couple years ago. It was a Nick Cage movie called Looking Glass, and the movie was, it was okay. It turned out okay, but I think the set camaraderie and everything was great. We were in Kanab, Utah. It's a tiny, tiny little town, the very bottom of Utah, and you can drive from one side of the town to the other in 5 minutes. And we were just shooting in this little motel for 90% of the movie, and even half the cast and crew were staying at the motel. So they hooked all the sound department, all of us up with, and one of the makeup girls up with just kind of an Airbnb. And it was kind of, the fun part about it was you were all just together, you had nowhere else to go for the whole month and a half. You just had to hang out with everyone. And if you wanted to go do something, you were taking other members of the crew and the cast with you. And I think that there's something to be said about set camaraderie and things like that. And, you know, I've been on movies where you go to set, you work your 12, 14 hours, you come home and you go to sleep in your own bed with your own family. But there's other sets I'm sure that we've all been on that are kind of like they're remote. You know, you're with the cast and crew and you're all staying at the same place and you kind of only have each other that you know. And you grow way closer, way quicker that way. And, you know, for like them or hate them, you got to be with them, you know, way more than you usually do. So I don't know. That one is kind of sticks out because of that. Most of the others I've kind of had a place to stay of my own and things like that. But that one, we were just with each other for a month and a half, you know.
Now, Nicolas Cage, he's done a ton of movies. So were you miking him up directly?
Yeah. Me and Nick, we're not good friends. I'm not calling him every day, but yeah, we got to know each other a little bit. And, you know, sometimes he gets a bad rap of things a little bit. And he does take some productions that are not the best. But man, just seeing that guy act and seeing him turn it on and off was something I'd never seen before. And I've dealt with other big actors before, probably not as big as him, but he's still an extremely talented actor. Just seeing some of the stuff he was pulling off was it's just fun to watch. And he couldn't have been nicer. You know, he had one day that he was a little bit angry, but he had justification for it. But other than that, he was very nice to the cast and crew. He's very talented, very professional. And, you know, so it kind of sucks that he gets a bad rap sometimes from people, but he still got it as far as acting chops.
So what would be a miking setup for something like that?
Yeah, the mixer that I do most of the work I do with, his name's Joe Sanchez. He's out of Vegas. He is a big fan of wires. We wire almost all the time. If there's any dialogue, for sure we're wiring. Even if there's not dialogue, sometimes just to get general breathing or moving, you know, just as a, you know, extra piece of audio, we might mic people up all the time just in case. So for him, for that movie, he was mostly wearing kind of a cotton t-shirt sort of thing. So it was generally, you know, we had a pretty good system down where, again, we're all pretty close. So he doesn't have a trailer too far away or anything. So I could just walk to his trailer. It's just across the parking lot. We just use DPAs and a rubber mount and just go underneath the shirt, his cotton shirt, and just stick it right to his skin. And generally it sounded pretty good. The hard part about that production was they were shooting 3 cameras at once most of the time. As some of you know who are boom ops out there, that can be, you know, just really, really challenging just to know everyone's frame at the same time. And oftentimes there's one on steady or there's one handheld, so they don't really have an established frame. And the others are locked off, but they've got their wides. They're shooting their wides and tights at the same time, which is also another thing I just won't get into right now, but you guys know what I'm talking about. So we relied on wires a lot with 3 cameras. Sometimes, you know, a lot of our movies, I know he likes to do it this way, that mixer, but a lot of movies, you know, you see the wires are getting better. They're sounding better. They're getting smaller. I think we're seeing more of a movement that way anyways. I mean, boom is still always king, at least in most people's book, in my book, but the wires are just getting much better nowadays. So I think that's really good to just know that skill, to be really just practicing all the time with different clothing, different, you know, mounts, different mics, things like that. At least for me, it's one of the most challenging parts. As far as booming goes, keeping shadows out of the scene, I'm generally pretty good with that, but miking is one of the things that it's just a skill. It's just something you got to practice, you know?
Yeah, now, how did you stick the mic to the skin?
Well, Nick, he has chest hair quite a bit. So what we would have to do is we would have to put just a little piece of gaff down or something, generally, which, of course, is not fun to take off. But most actors that have been there and they've got chest hair and stuff like that, they're pretty professional with it. They understand what you have to do. Once in a while, he'd wear this kind of flannel button-up shirt, which was kind of nice. We'd just put it in between the buttons, and it sounded great. But if he had a cotton shirt on, yeah, we'd have to do some sort of gaff, little bit of trickery.
Speaking of miking people up, and do you have a list of expendables that you like to use when you're miking?
Generally, I really like just starting with having your mics in like an RM11 or something, some sort of rubber mount to protect them. Really big fan of the Rycote over covers, stuff like that. I've got a couple Countryman B6s, and those I just start with in a Rycote over cover, just in case if we're outside. If not, if I can hide it in a button, that's better. So sometimes I'll put a little Joe Sticky stuff around the head and just hide it behind a button, which if you're indoors generally sounds really, really good. It's got a lot of air around it and stuff like that. I've recently tried, listening to some of your podcasts and stuff. People were talking about this Bumblebee, expendable stuff. So I recently got some of that and tried it, and I really like it. I got to experiment with it a little bit more, but it seemed we had a really windy day. We were shooting a little 48-hour film contest thing. We had a really windy day, and I threw that on there first time. Sounded great. No wind, nothing. So.
Yeah, this past weekend I was working on a short film project, and we had 4 actors. We had two women and 2 men. Let's see, on each of the women I actually used the Hide-A-Mic bra clip. So with the COS 11s, we put that right up in there, and then that clips right in the middle, right on the bra. And then we had one was wearing the pack on her back, and it was right inside her dress, and that looked nice. And then the other one we had a thigh strap, so a little Ursa thigh strap for that. The guys, one we went behind the tie, came over the back of the tie knot right down through the middle. And then I actually used, Hide-A-Mic also has a little tie clip holder, kind of a thing. So put the COS 11 in there, and it just sits right in the knot. And then I had an RM11 for the other guy because he was wearing like a shirt with a vest. And we'd put a little Joe Sticky stuff on the front of that in the back, and then just sandwiched it, right between 2 buttons and stuff. So that looked pretty good. But it worked pretty good.
You got to use all the different setups.
Exactly. The other day I was thinking, today I'm going to use RM11s, and I hadn't used them in a while. And then one day I was like, I'm going to use some of these Hide-A-Mics. And then other days, I've got some Rycote stickies and things like that. So, and sometimes you mic people up and it doesn't work. It's like, okay, no. And so you switch out and you do something else. But we talk about this a lot, but I wish the same thing worked the same every time, but it doesn't.
Well, but at least that is part of the fun, because part of it is, as sound guys, we're probably more technical than creative most of the time. I know, going through school and learning all the, the camera side of things and the acting side of things is really creative, a lot of it. But sound people most of the time we're pretty technical. But at least with miking, we kind of get a little bit get to be creative with things. We get to have a little fun trying to figure out mic, because there's not always just one great solution. Everyone's kind of got their preferences and the expendables they like to use and where they like to put stuff. And just because one person uses it one way doesn't mean another way can't sound good. So at least that's a little part that we get to be sort of creative with. So that's kind of cool to hear you got to mix them all up on that one.
Yeah, no, just trying to shake it up a little bit. I have to say, though, when we were using this thigh strap, and the actress, she's like pulls up her skirt, because a lot of times you hand an actress that's used them before, and they'll put it on there and adjust the tension and make sure it's just right. But she just stuck her leg out there, and I'm like, most of the time you hand it to somebody and they know what they're doing, and this time I was like, okay. And then she just once I got it on there, she was able to adjust it to where it fit better. But
yeah, some of them just get your job done. They've been there.
Exactly. Yeah, professional actors and actresses, they do. Yeah, they're so do whatever you have to do, no big thing. And the other people, you just you have to do a little hand holding.
Right. Well, that's the problem too. Is sometimes you just, at least at first, you don't know. So you got to treat everyone very carefully at the beginning, because you might think that it's okay to just walk up and start wiring them, but some actors or actresses are pretty touchy. So, it's always the first few awkward days of feeling each other out, trying to figure out, what's going to be okay and what's not.
Now, are there any current projects you're working on that you can talk about?
Let's see, man. It's mostly just local stuff. We've got a couple companies that are doing a lot of YouTube stuff right now, and we're trying to get that all taken up. Nothing as far as big movies. We just kind of got done a couple months ago with that Ari Aster one coming out, that Midsummer. So he's the one that did Hereditary, and his second one is called Midsummer. It comes out in June, but they did some pickup days a couple months ago that we just finished, and that was cool to be on a set, because I'm a huge fan of Hereditary, and he's such a talented director. So it was really cool to be on that set. But as far as big productions right now, nothing at the moment. It's mostly just local stuff, and just staying really busy doing that right now. Now,
out of all the audio projects or all the jobs where you actually were doing audio, what was the biggest challenge you had to face?
So we did a movie in Monument Valley. I don't know if you've been to Monument Valley or heard of it. I'm sure you've seen pictures and all that. We did a movie out there. It's a pretty big movie. huge budget. The director was a Polish guy, really angry guy, and man, everyone, the actors, the crew, they had such a hard time with him. Well, we're about to do this scene. Okay, one of the problems we had was our main actor didn't wear a shirt. He's out in the desert, and it's kind of dream sequence stuff where he's writing at a desk in the desert with no shirt, so we can't wire him up, obviously. So it's all boom. And we had this huge scene. I mean, it's 6 pages of dialogue or something, and it's big, long scene. We got 2 cameras that are going handheld. We've got the first ADs on whips trying to pull the focus and whatnot. You know, I tell the camera guys beforehand, I'm like, hey man, if I get in your guys' frame, just say boom, look at me sternly. I don't know, do something. Just let me know, because I can't see anything of what you guys are doing. So we do a couple takes and it's great. You know, it's like a dance. It was really fun. And I'm looking at everyone. I'm feeling pretty proud of myself, you know, getting the audio and dancing between these cameras. Well, the third take comes on and we do the same thing, and we kind of settle into their final part of the dialogue, and I'm thinking everything's okay, and I just feel myself get yanked out of the scene all of a sudden, like someone physically grabbing me. And I look back, and the director had walked all the way across set and grabbed me and pulled me out because the boom was in the shot, I guess. So no one said anything, and I stood. It was hilarious, because I stood there quietly, let them finish the take. And then right when they yelled cut, me and my sound mixer just started barking at him. And we got on his case and said, hey man, that is not okay. I had a boom over your actor's head. All you had to do was say boom, and I was up. I couldn't see anything. And, you know, I don't even know that he apologized for that necessarily. But I've never been physically manhandled on set other than that. But that was, it's a time I won't soon forget. I'm not the only crew member that he actually did that to also. There was one of the focus pullers was, I guess, soft on his focus one time. He did the exact same thing, went over to him and physically yanked him. So I don't know. It was interesting. It was kind of an interesting situation that doesn't happen all that often. Thank goodness.
Interesting. Now, would you classify that as your worst on-set experience, or do you have a worst on-set experience?
That's definitely got to be the worst. I mean, you know, we've all got those other times. The first movie I did as a boom op, I was not ready for. It was a movie called War Pigs, and I was just out of school, fresh out of school, and the sound mixer, he's a friend of mine. He's a nice guy, but he was quitting smoking after like 20 years, and he was yelling at me so much on that movie. I mean, I remember going home. Probably shouldn't say this, but I remember going home like crying a couple nights and saying, there's no way I'm doing this anymore. There's no way I'm doing this. I tell my wife, like, it's not worth it. I'm not going to be a boom op on these big movies because it's just not worth it. He yelled at me so much through the mixer that the editor afterwards told the director, he's like, man, this sound mixer's being really tough on this boom op. And the director personally called my sound mixer and said, hey man, you got to apologize. I heard some of the things you were saying to him through the mixer. And he's like, that was not cool. And, you know, part of it was he was just really stressed out at the time. There's a lot of things going on. So, but again, it's a good first experience because they've all been easier since then, you know. But man, yeah, I was ready to quit after, you know, day 5, first movie. So there's been a couple rough ones, but yeah, they make you stronger. I don't know.
Exactly. So you're married and you have kids. So how do you balance that work-life experience?
Geez, I mean, that's one of the hardest things for me. You know, I see a lot of these people in the industry and they've been there for a while, and they, you know, a lot of them are single or don't have kids, or their kids are older and out of the house or can take care of themselves. So I've got an 8-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And so they're in those really young years, and, you know, I just don't want to miss a lot. Yeah. So I have to pick my projects, you know, pretty carefully. And, you know, I don't want to say no too many times, because if you say no a couple times to a mixer, he's going to just stop calling. So you got to kind of try to find that balance of like what projects are worth it, and, you know, saying yes enough times that they still will come to you. But at the same time, it's like, you're never going to get these years back with your kids. So to me, that's pretty important also. You know, you don't want to miss that. You don't want to get to the end of your life and you know, you missed a bunch of these early years with your kids. So it's a really hard balance. I'm grateful and blessed that I picked the profession I did with the mix of sound and then doing my own production stuff, because I can stay at home and still make money. I do a lot of editing. Probably that's like 70% of what I'm doing most of the time is just editing. And, it's not super lucrative. It's not super fun most of the time, but it is, you kind of got to pick your battles. And I'm home with the kids, and I get to go to their baseball games and their graduations and things like that. So it's a balance for anyone in the industry. As most of you know, it's just, it's tough. There's no great answer.
Your kids are not going to remember that, oh, dad was working, he was working hard, trying to make a little extra money. They're going to remember he wasn't there. You don't get to go to everything, but although we try to do all that, but yeah, it's a challenge, because you don't want to miss out on something, a work project, but you also don't want to, what in the end, what's really more important.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not, I'm not trying to get rich doing this. I'm not trying to go buy a bunch of Lambos and stuff like that. It's just like, let's pay the bills. Let's get into a house, and then, just, maybe say no to a couple projects. Like you said, maybe you have to. And I'm okay with that. That's where I want to be.
We always like to be prepared when we're going to set, but have you ever forgotten the audio equipment when you're on your way?
There's been a couple times where it's like, it's always those odd things. You know what I mean? It's never like you never forget your big stuff. It's always like, the little 1/4 inch to 1/8 inch adapters for the headphones. I've forgotten that before. And that's kind of ridiculous, because you can't, there's no one on set that's going to have that. If you or your mixer didn't show up with it. So it's like, well, what do I do now? I can't actually hear what I'm doing. Or I actually have forgotten headphones before, which also is problem, but you can generally find somebody with headphones if you have to, and I've done that before. Now I just keep like a extra pair of headphones in my bag just in case. But yeah, nothing big. Mostly it's like that stupid adapter. Now I just leave it in my mixer so I don't forget it, but there's been too many times where I forgot that dumb thing.
All right. Well, do you have any freelance tips that you could share? Do you use any kind of freelance services like Production Hub or Staff Me Up or anything like that?
I don't. Generally, all the jobs I get for sound are just pretty much word of mouth type stuff. I know it's so cliche, but it's all about who you know, and just like extending your circle of friends and people that you work with, and just always putting your best face on when you're on set. Because you just never, what I found is you never know who's going to get you your next jobs. There could be a PA on a set that you think nothing of, but maybe they see you, they get to know you, they like you, and it seems like you're running good sound. They don't know, but they call you up, a year later and say, hey, you still do sound? You just never know. So it's kind of like, just always work hard and just be professional, put your best foot forward, and people will call you. And again, you don't know if it's just a dumb production, it's low paid, and you think it's going to lead to nothing. And then all of a sudden that producer really liked you, and he's calling you for, a 6-month documentary they're doing or something a few years later. You never know. So mostly it's just word of mouth that I've gotten to. As far as my business, it's just a whole thing of marketing, which is a whole other beast that could be tackled. But I need to get on some of those websites. I think definitely I'd get more jobs, but most of the time I just have a few mixers that I like to work with, and they stay busy enough that I kind of just stick with them.
The project I was working on this past weekend, it was like I knew 2 of the actors, I knew the director, and it's, and some of those people I show up, oh, I didn't know you were working on this. A writer that I had worked with before was there. And so it's, you never know, your paths are going to cross again. So, be nice to everybody.
Yep, indeed. It is a small community. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of people, but you end up seeing a lot of the same people on sets.
So if some of our listeners wanted to get into production sound, do you have any tips that people could follow to kind of move along?
I sometimes I teach these students here at the local college a little bit, and I say, just take a path, that less people go on. Everyone wants to act and be camera. But sound, I lucked into being in sound just because I was the only one here in St. George that did it, and I got a lot of jobs just because I was the only one that did it. And I wouldn't say at first I was super passionate about it, but because I was the only one, I learned a lot. And I would say just get your hands on some equipment. I mean, even if whatever you can afford or rent or anything like that, just get your hands on some equipment and try to get comfortable with it, because that's sort of a big deal. Renting equipment always even still makes me nervous because you don't know what state it's in. You don't know all the ins and outs. If it's working great, awesome. But if something happens in the middle of set and the producer's looking at you like, fix it, you have to troubleshoot something you've never worked with, that becomes a problem real quick. So just knowing your equipment, working with stuff, like I said, as far as wiring, just I wire up my kids. I just have them wear different outfits and I just wire them up and just let them run around the house and just try different stuff, So it's like anything, just a lot of practice.
All right. Renting versus buying. Do you have any preference on that?
Well, definitely, it's tough because you would always rather buy. And like I said, just knowing, because I got my Zoom F8, which is not, it's not by any means a huge sound mixer, top quality sound mixer, but I can do things with that I'd feel more comfortable with than like a 788 or something like that. Just because maybe I don't know all the ins and outs of some sound devices stuff or something like that. So if you can buy something that you can use on actual professional sets where people will hire you and you can, like a Zoom. When I got this was like $1,000, so it's not too bad. And I learned it in and out and I tested it on tons of things. And I'm grateful that I did, because I would rather use this than rent something that I don't know, like a Zaxcom or something that I just don't know. I would feel way less comfortable with that. So if you can buy something small just to get you started, I'd suggest buying it. If you're not in that position, rent and just figure it out, that's fine. But if you can buy something and have it your own, I think it's much more, you prefer that.
Well, Kreigh, as we kind of start to wrap things up, do you have any final words of wisdom you can share with the listeners?
Just keep practicing your craft, and anything in filmmaking, I don't think is super lucrative for a lot of people. And like we discussed with the family stuff and the hours that we work and the crazy locations that we get ourselves into, like, you have to be passionate about it. Because if you're not, it just seems silly. You can make money much easier ways than filmmaking. So if you don't absolutely love what you do, then go find some other way to make money. That would be my biggest suggestion. Because if you don't love it, people look at us, and if they saw what we did day to day, they would think we were crazy. And they'd think we were getting paid tons and tons and tons of money. Which sometimes we are, but most of the time, at least in my case, not so much.
Because it's true. Everybody thinks it's so glamorous. But and it's fun, but we do it, and then sometimes some people do it and go, "Oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be." It's work. You're working hard, and you have a craft, and you need to be good at it, and so that's true. That's some good advice, though.
Yeah, I think a lot of people see those like behind the scenes DVD features where everyone's having fun and joking around. They're like, filmmaking's awesome. These guys just get to play around with their friends all day. They don't see the 18-hour days in the freezing cold and, being yelled at by an actor or something, or being yanked from a scene by the director. They don't see that stuff. Right, that stuff doesn't make the cut.
Well, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Mostly my Instagram, probably. I'm on there quite a bit. I do have all the Facebook and everything. My Instagram is at Kreigh Carter Productions. So we're in the mode of rebranding right now. We're going to change our name soon enough. But at Kreigh Carter Productions, I'm on there quite a bit. I love to just follow a lot of other sound people. I love to answer questions if other people have questions. And
well, now spell your name, because that can be hard sometimes.
Yes. It's Kreigh, and then Carter Productions, CarterProductions.
All right, I want to say thanks to Kreigh Carter for being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And a big thanks to all of our listeners out there. If you'd like us to discuss a particular topic, please send us an email at locationsoundpodcast@gmail.com. We would love for you to subscribe and leave us a comment. We're available on Apple Podcast, and for Android users, check out Google Podcast. Also, we're on Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and on your favorite podcast app. Until next time, remember, sound is half the picture.